Good. How are you today?
Doing all right. Yeah, hanging in there. Hanging in there.
Good. How's the weather in your part of the world?
Nice today. It was cold. I'm in Boston area. It was cold this week. But today is like 84, so it's back to not being cold here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very
Like
good. Yeah,
low 60s earlier this week. So it
it was what?
was like high of low 60s earlier this week. So it was
Oh,
like,
that's a change.
yeah. So we're back to
Wow.
summer, I guess. So
Yeah,
but
it's
yeah,
I'm in California and it's 85 or something like that today, and
nice.
yeah, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I can't complain.
Are you in the
Yeah,
Bay Area or what part of California?
yeah, I'm in the Bay Area. Yeah,
Nice.
I'm in Campbell.
Okay.
San San Jose is that way. It's the next city over. um, Cupertino, Mountain View, Sunnyvale are all that way. We're, I don't know, 50 miles ish south of San Francisco.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, Starburst, we had an office in Palo Alto, so I was in Palo Alto a moderate amount.
Yeah,
So yeah, yeah.
cool. Well,
Awesome.
thanks for doing this. I
Yeah,
appreciate
no
it.
problem. No problem.
The whole point of this podcast is to get more stories about leadership out in the world. Because when I started leading software teams, there weren't any, and so it was all a big mystery to me. And that was a while ago, and that problem hasn't been solved. And so that's why my impetus for doing this series is, talk to people, find out what happens. I have one scripted question.
Okay.
That's the starting point, which is, how did your leadership journey start? um, and it didn't have to be like, if you were a shift lead in McDonald's to begin with, great. Like, that's the kind of the starting point.
Okay. Cool.
Go.
All right. So yeah, how did I get started in leadership? I think I think officially I moved into the position through sort of like a battlefield type promotion. It was the startup life of you're an engineer and then your boss leaves and they're like, well, gee, I think you're the boss now. And it's like, oh, okay, I can try that,
Nice.
and so yeah, so it was like something I just kind of fell into. And so I always had an active interest in doing it. But to your point, I think it wasn't anything like pre-scripted or pre-planned, and it wasn't anything I was like well trained in at the time, or had a strong mentorship, right? Because I was like, it was just me, and then there's like this SVP of engineering, so it's a pretty wide gap between us at the time, and learning how to be a manager was, and managing up and all that kind of fun stuff was interesting. So, but yeah, that's how it started. Was like, just a random, you coming to work and it's like, oh, I guess you're in charge now. So
Nice.
yeah.
So if it's any consolation, I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
That's a pretty, um that seems to be a pretty common uh story, is, that's how it happens.
Yeah.
And so when you started off, like, what kind of hurdles did you run into?
I think I think and I see this behavior in other people that I've coached into management too. I think it's your desire to like control the output of people rather than like delegating and letting people work through their own challenges and problems. Like being a micromanager, it's a hard instinct to overcome
Mm. Mm-hmm.
initially. I think it's like, because you're an engineer, you know how to do this, you know how to do this. You're a great engineer, you know how to do this better than they do. And like, why aren't they just doing what you would do in this situation? Well, I just tell them this is how I would do it, right? Like, and I think overcoming that instinct, is I think one of the harder things, harder lessons you learn in management is like, when to involve and engage yourself into a technical discussion versus, let somebody else do their job and trust them, and they haven't. So I think it's that like learning to trust, learning to delegate, learning to be comfortable If things don't go the way that you always, you had intended them to go in your mind, but learning those things over time was, I think, one of the hardest lessons to learn as a manager. So,
That's so interesting. Huh. Okay. That's cool. I'm so again, this is why we're doing this because that's so when I started leading software teams, um, I very quickly realized that I was not the best coder in the room.
mm,
Um, and probably it's because my first hire was a kid out of Berkeley who was a computer science major who'd been coding. He was like, I think when I hired him, he'd been out of Berkeley for a year, but he'd started coding when he was like 12.
mm,
And I think at that point in time, I had maybe, if I'm being generous, 3 years experience because I was self taught.
yeah.
And I was like, holy crap, this guy probably knows stuff that I never considered before. I'm sure he knows stuff I've never considered before. And so like I was constantly like, okay, what's your idea? You know? Um oh, that's yeah. So I was the other end of the spectrum of like, you know, everybody in the room's got to be smarter than me about this stuff. Um so that's super interesting. That is interesting. Um how'd you get over that micromanagement thing?
Well, I think, and this is where, like, I think, you know, sensing frustration when I involve myself in a situation, you could feel would bring tension, to the situation.
Mm,
And so I think it was just a little bit of introspection on my part, and kind of being like, well, the kind of well, what could be going on? And I think about, well, if I reverse the tables, would I want my manager doing this to me, right? Like, would this be an experience I'm comfortable with? Would this be something I enjoy as an occupational experience? I realized it was like it was too much, and that, and that I had to back off a little bit, and
mm-hmm.
the reserve times for direct involvement to times that were really emergencies, as opposed to letting someone explore the problem space, and that's when I think it's where I learned sort of the art of questioning a little bit, like directing someone with questions as opposed to just telling them a solution. Like when you see a problem, it's like, well, have you considered the security implications of this feature? Like, walk me through how that's going to work, and then you can kind of like mine for some of the details that you're seeing.
Right, right,
And it's just a nicer way to do it, I guess. It's a kinder way. It's a less authoritative way to do it.
right.
And so that, but for me, yeah, it was just realizing, like, okay, like, I'm not being the kind of manager that I think I would want to be, right? I'm not being the kind of leader that I would want to work for, right? And I think trying to
Yeah,
envision that ideal, what do you expect out of these, yeah, out of your supervisor, and trying to be that person. So,
right.
yeah.
That's that's awesome self-awareness. That's really good.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think, well, because, like, to your point earlier, there isn't a lot of great training in this profession, so you're kind of left to your own devices and your own just self-awareness and your own self-discovery of what works, what doesn't work for you,
Yep.
and eventually kind of cobbling that together into a philosophy of some kind.
Right.
But yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
Um, what what are your top three philosophical perspectives about leadership? Because you said the word philosophy, and immediately
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, I wonder what like what's his 20,000 foot views?
yeah. But, well, so I think um, I believe and I think it's important, especially in remote workplaces, right, um, to lead by example in terms of transparency and communication. For instance, like, I think being open, and running an organization that, where we assume positive intent, but we also, are not afraid to kind of ask questions or be curious, or, get involved in certain things. And so I think, like, that's an important part. I think ownership culture is a really important part of leadership at startups, especially, like,
Yeah.
and as a leader, exemplifying that, right? Like, working late if you have to, staying with the team through incidents, rolling up your sleeves and getting involved in the process. I think it's really important for leaders to not be too proud to anything, not too proud to do
Sure.
anything, and to actually be, if that's what you want your team to do when the cards are on the table, then that's what you should do too. Um, and I think will be another one. I think I always think that, I think embracing failure culture is a big part of it. Like embracing the fact that we are all human. We will all make mistakes. I will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. It's really less about a blame culture and a more like, well, what did we learn and how can we learn from our failures? Because I think all the times I felt learned a lot more about myself or the company I work for or the ecosystem I'm in came through failure, right? Came through some sort
Sure.
of obstacle that we had to overcome together that was not always pleasant at the time, but like, I think leading when everything is great is, that's a really easy job. Like it's great when everything's awesome and everything's on cruise control and everyone's doing their work and everyone's happy and engaged. And but then there's, in 2022 the SaaS market collapses and valuations are slashed, and there are people, we have to lay off staff and everything, and it's just that's the stuff that's really hard. And it's really hard to like navigate those situations and have help other people navigate those situations. But it's like, I think you have to sort of embrace that as a leader, because I think that's where leadership is most important. Like I think for
Right.
me, it's showing up in failure and learning from like everybody else and being humble about it and owning it. So
I like that. Yeah, that's a really good philosophical perspective, I think, because yeah, especially in the startup world, um, the odds are that you're going to fail
yeah, a lot,
a
a
lot.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and um, and there is no startup founder that's got it all figured out. You know,
No.
if,
I tell everybody working for a startup isn't by definition, founding a company or working for a startup is insane, right?
right.
It's because there are bigger companies already trying to do what you're doing. And if you want the safe bet, you work for a big company and you take the steady paycheck and you have a certainty and roadmap and you don't work as hard a lot of times. Like it's a different lifestyle, but and so you just have to kind of embrace the fact that we're doing something hard and we
Mhm.
may fail. And that's only the only strength we have is that we can fail and rebound quickly, right? We're small, we're
Right.
agile, like we can pivot, a lot quicker than everybody else can and just, you know, ship it, learn, fails, move on to the next. Sorry, what's the next item on the list? Let's ship that. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I, most of my career, I've been in startups or smaller companies. Um,
yeah,
and the thing that I noticed when I spent time in big companies was how many more skills people in the startup world had
yeah,
than the folks in the big companies. Like they get in there and they get super siloed, and especially if they get in early in their careers,
yeah.
they only know how to do one thing, you know, and that's um, I found that very frustrating. When I was trying to solve problems, I'd talk to people and they'd be like, "Oh, I don't know anything outside of the box that I'm in," and I'd be like,
Yeah,
"Really? Like seriously?" Because
yeah,
you can't say that in a startup. Like, in the startup world,
no,
it's like, I'm wearing 17 hats, and if I don't know the answer, I'm going to go find hat number 18 and figure that one out.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. And at the end of the day, that's why it never. I worked for a company that was acquired by CA for a while, so I worked in like sort of the CA ecosystem for a bit, and I just for me it didn't. I'm happy working for startups. I'm happy. I like the diversity of the day, the amount of things I can get involved in or do. I'd like
Hmm.
some of the inconsistency with that, and
Sure.
and the learning. There's no friction or barrier to learning something new internally. If you want to get involved in a project, people are happy for help. Roll up your sleeves. Like, there's not any bureaucracy. You're not fighting management fiefdoms and the office hierarchy to do something different or new. And I think that's one of the things I like most about it. Is just the flexibility. I think it's I've never felt like a box stand. I've always hated that feeling of like being being trapped and helpless, right? That's the thing that really bothers you is like you're fighting against this bureaucracy to get something important, what you think is important done. You're just running into wall after wall after wall after wall. And it's like, come on, like this is how do we operate? You know, this is
Right. Yeah.
like how do we operate here?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think there was an article that I read years ago that was kind of a it was a critique of the hiring structure of big companies, and it kind of went like this. To your point, if you're going to go into a startup, you have to have a level of expectation and comfort around failure and risk and uncertainty. And that's how big companies start off. But over time, they start hiring people that are more and more um, certainty focused.
yeah,
And so, and those people just, they're very rigid thinkers.
yeah,
And then you get a company that becomes very rigid. And then, actually, I think this was Clay Christensen in The Innovator's Dilemma.
yeah,
I think is actually the one that had this in there. I think that's where I first ran across it. Is they
yeah,
get rigid and then they Xerox themselves. Where Park invented the GUI and then couldn't figure out a way to use it, and then Steve Jobs saw it and Apple took over the world. You
yeah,
know? Yeah. And everybody that ever asks me, who should I work for? I'm like, go join a startup, find a small company. You'll just learn so much more. And, in this part of the world, we get a lot of people that are like, oh my God, I've got to join Google, or I've got to join Facebook or one of the other FANG companies. And
yeah,
I'm like, you need to learn a bunch of stuff first, you know, um, because otherwise if you manage to get in, you're not going to be super valuable.
yeah.
And so, yeah,
No, it's great because and you can cover a lot of ground in your career at startups, and that's usually because people are always like, well, how do I get promoted? How do I get ahead? And it's like a lot of times it's like you can grow your career as fast as you want
yeah,
because we will give you more responsibility. We will you want to learn how to manage people, great. I'm sure we'll hire enough people at some point. We'll need another manager, right? Like when a company's on the upswing, it's it's almost, it's more of like, well, how much from this fire hose do you actually want to drink right now, right?
right,
Like it's,
yeah,
there's because I will give you as much work as you can handle, and then some. And so, I think that's what I like, but then people can actually develop their careers pretty, at a pace that, far outpaces like larger companies with, more
right,
codified
right.
learning and development plans and stuff like that, because I think it gives you the ability to really just, get involved where you want to be. Change engineering disciplines. You can do that. You can go from a front end to a back end. You can go from to get involved in the ops universe. You can do security
Ev-
engineer, right? There's so many like things you can lean into and projects to take up that's sort of limitless in terms of the skill sets you can acquire. So
that may be one of the best um, marketing pitches I've ever heard for going to work at a startup. Yeah, yeah. That's certainly been my experience. Is
yeah,
that
yeah,
it's just like, what do you want to learn, and what's the problem of the week, or month or year or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think the flip side to it is that there's another opportunity if a company has layoffs. If you're still there, it's
yeah,
again more responsibility because the company's reduced their resources, and now they're like, okay, who wants to step up and you know whatever, right? Because there's stuff available needs to be done.
yeah.
um, and I think that's one of those underappreciated aspects of surviving a layoff
Mm,
is that um,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think it leads to just better engineers. I think, it's I try to have everybody do a rotation in infrastructure at some point in their career, like learning how software is deployed and managed and scaled and understand the infrastructure underneath it. Like if you ever want to found a startup, like those are like critical skills because you're the DevOps person, you're also the engineer, you're also the product manager. I mean, like you're everything. And so
Right.
I
Right.
find, and so I find like that I like it, especially people tell me they want to be a founder or something someday. I'm like, all right, you should you're taking a
Yeah.
DevOps rotation, right? You're learning infrastructure this quarter because that's like pretty foundational to how it all works. And I find it's like and now with like Kubernetes and the more complex technologies there, it's a lot more complicated than it used to be in many cases. And so learning some
Right.
of that
Right.
is pretty important.
Yeah. 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 It's such a it, there. There's got to be a technical like parallel book for things founders need to know from the technology perspective, like for non-technical founders,
Yeah.
you know, because for like, there's multiple books on the business marketing sales side of startups,
Yeah.
um, of how to get going. Guy Kawasaki wrote Art of the Start and then Startup 2.0, and maybe he's got another one out there. Eric Ries wrote Lean Startup.
Yeah.
Um, Alex Hormozzi's got a bunch of books on sales and marketing now. There's a bunch of content around there, but I don't know that I've ever seen a book that was, so you think you want to be a startup founder, but you don't know much about engineering. Here's the stuff you need to be thinking about, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I think for non-technical founders, that would be super helpful. If you're looking
Yeah. I
for a
mean,
book to write,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's,
yeah,
yeah, no, that's not a bad idea. There's always such a, well, I think there's always that mysticism associated with engineering to a certain extent, especially if you're like working with like a non-technical co-founder in some capacity. It's like it's always, we're perceived as like these sorcerers that do things that people don't fully understand, and and there's like this kind of like I mean, it's just engineering, although I do think now with like AI tooling and everything that's coming out, I think we are starting to bridge the gap a little bit between like taking an idea from pre-production to to a technical solution, and at least a proof of concept phase. I don't think it's really great production engineering at this point, but but you can get a lot of work done and not be super technical
right, right,
with some of it, and see the output of it and dig in a bit more. I've had friends who have actually used AI. They were like a data scientist or something, learned to program using like GPT as an assistant because they'll start with it, and they realize over time as their project goes on, like the rewards of using AI are diminished, and but now they have like worked with the project and understand the code structure, and now are actually like now contributing. And that was a really interesting use case that I saw because I hadn't really thought about that, but like as like
right,
a tutor or assistant to getting your app bootstrapped and everything, but also like over time, like, you're actually acquiring that skill set because the AI is progressively less helpful in more complex scenarios.
right.
And so you're sort of now forced to understand it
Yeah,
and absorb it. And I thought it was pretty cool. The different way to learn. But
yeah. Somebody I spoke with recently who's not. He's a sales engineer, but he's not super technical.
yeah,
He said that what he started doing is giving. I can't remember which AI. I think maybe they're using Claude.
okay,
But he was like he would give it a block of code and say, "Explain to me what this does."
yeah,
And it would explain to him in a way that as a human he could understand because he couldn't really read the code. And
yeah,
his comment to your point is that he's been learning coding, and he actually
yeah,
now doesn't always need the AI because he's like, oh, that's like this other thing, and I remember how that worked, and blah blah blah. So he's getting better understanding. And I thought, oh, that's a good use case. That makes sense. I'm not sure he's ever going to write code for a living, but understanding fundamentals of how things work is it's always a good idea, because I think being stuck in thinking that engineers are wizards um, is problematic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. No, 100%. No, and I think, um, it's and I run into it. I'd say it's like working in work. I'd say it's like one of the harder lessons of leadership, though. I'd say is to once you kind of like exit engineering is like like when you become like a CTO or VP of engineering and you're like starting to work with more cross-functional people and realizing how other people work, because I think we're also surrounded by a bit of a bubble as we grow up in engineering, because mostly we're talking to other engineers and we're kind of siloed in our own universe, and we get the requirements in, we generate the code out, but we're abstracted from a lot of the other realities of operating a business and other departments of operating a business. I'd say like that's been where the learning has been for me really in more recent years, is just, well, how do companies operate, and how do marketing teams function, and how appreciating the sales process, and and those sorts of things has all been new learnings. And I think it's been, and so I think it's, and I think other departments work together more than like sales and marketing work together all the time on a lot of initiatives, right? So I think there's more shared empathy among other departments, and engineering has always been kind of this endpoint inside of a business that's always been kind of abstracted away from a lot of the other company. I mean, I've
Right.
worked in
Right.
I've worked in shops where we've had like a completely separate Slack environments and stuff like that, where like we're completely partitioned from reality, from
Yeah.
business reality. So um,
Yeah. I've certainly been in companies where I've seen that. Um, and I think the companies that operated the best tried really hard to integrate, to have that operate better, um, and have a more engineering had a much better understanding of the business than
yeah,
um, than not, because like I think the second startup that I was at, the founder actually told me, I want you to be talking to sales and marketing to learn things about their worlds
yeah,
that I'm not thinking of,
yeah,
that the executives aren't thinking of, and it'll help you with building the product better. And I was
yeah,
like, oh, okay, sure, no problem. And that I found that back channel to be super helpful.
mm,
Um, and then every place I went after that, I did that, and 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 I didn't realize that was unusual until uh like 10 years into my career was where I was like, oh, this is not like most people on the engineering side, they're not doing this.
yeah,
And it seems like, you know, I hate to sound like I'm down on big companies, but the big companies that I went to, that was even more of a silo problem. Um, and I talked to engineers who completely they had no idea how money came in the front of the building.
yeah,
And that I think because of startups, because you do care about money, that's another reason to go there first. You know, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's super
No, I
cool.
think it. I think it's important. I like it, if you're an enterprise company, you can have engineers shadow POVs, right? Like to see how people are actually, shadow the technical sales process, right? Like see how people are actually using your software, see what their use cases are,
Yeah,
whether
yeah,
whether internal pain points. I think it's a good tool because no, and this is, I half think that like management positions, exist to just keep feeding context and reminding of context in these situations. Like why do we develop why this feature? Why is it important? What are we building? And because I do believe that like people make better software when it's not a ticket, but it's something that we're actually delivering to service a need to the company and understanding what
right,
that need
right.
is and not abstracting that fact from the people working on it, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
That's
so
that's 100% right. And Gallup does all these different kinds of employee surveys,
mm,
and one of the things that they talk about regularly is employees being able to tie the work they're doing to the mission of the company
yeah,
and the end user benefit, you know. And so yeah, so I'm a huge fan of always, this is why this thing, whatever it is, this is why we're building this, is because these are the people that are going to directly benefit from it. um, and that it makes it more personal, you know.
yeah,
And I think that's a huge impact for the engineers, is they're like, oh, it's Maria over in marketing, right? This is going to make her life better, right? Or the sales team keeps complaining that they're losing deals because we don't have this feature, right? Oh, well, let's build it and help them close more business and help the company. It's like it that personalization. Yeah, it's more
yeah,
human. Yeah, I like that.
yeah,
Do more of that.
100%.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah,
That's been a really good thing. Um, you mentioned coaching and training folks for leadership roles in the company.
yeah.
What's your system?
Well, first I try to paint a path where there are both technical leadership and like people and process leadership roles that exist inside of a company, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I make sure that people don't feel like they have to become a manager to advance their career, right? And so that they're, because I think it's acknowledging that when you kind of start going into the software manager tree, you're sort of starting a new career, a new job. Like
Right,
like the
right,
the, the skill sets that you have cultivated that made you an engineer are not necessarily the same. You'll still use some of those skill sets, but you're also developing a whole new other series of skills. And it's really acknowledging that and making sure people that's what they want to do, right? Like
right,
and
right.
understanding like if you can stay on the engineering track and you just progressively become a better engineer and you do there's leadership opportunities there and you're leading teams but you're not like cultivating people and process management because those skill sets are slightly different, and you have to actually commit to wanting to curate those and wanting to actually wanting to do that work and learning something new. And so for me, I try to convince people that the ones that I see that care, that usually that you can find out the engineers in your organization that have empathy for their other engineers. They're the ones that are reviewing the most code. They're the ones that are like organizing the team meetups. They're the ones that are, that are kind of the cultural center of your team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is important to identify because you can see that they have some of the raw skill sets maybe necessary to like learn some of these things, like how to be empathetic and how to, cultivate yeah, they have skills you can cultivate on top of, I would say, right? And so,
Right.
so yeah, and then it's, just about setting expectations and, and giving people the opportunity. I always let people start like coaching and leading a team without making the manager title official. Like I'll let them
Sure.
like sort of
Yep.
soft manage a team for a bit. After 6 months, we check in, something you like doing, something you want to continue, we can make it official. And then, I think it's just, continually building up that skill set, really working on like how do you effectively partner with product management and how do you scope a team and how, do you engage engineers to help you with some of this stuff? And and then kind of continuing from there. I think I think, and I think training a director is a little bit different, right? Like directors, now you're managing managers, you're now even more abstracted from the day-to-day operations of the
Yep,
business,
yep.
and being comfortable with that, and how how do you lead people that want to also be leaders, I think is a challenging thing. And then I think then it's really about learning more about the business around you. Like for VPs, it's like, do you really want to start exiting the engineering ecosystem at this phase of your career, right? Like, but yeah, I mean, I've and it's I would say it's been, and I like doing that. I really do like coaching other leaders. I mean, I coach technical leaders too, but it's because it's the path that I chose, right? It's the
Sure.
career path I've chosen for myself. So it's personally, personally motivating to get other people excited about this career path that I chose. So it is a little bit easier for me sometimes to coach the people leaders than it is the technical leaders. But yeah.
Well, and that totally makes sense. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that. Cool. I like that. Um, one of the things that I've noticed, so I've been coaching people more than a decade now.
Uh,
Um, and one of the things I've noticed is a discrepancy, and it has a big impact, is a discrepancy in belief structures between the thought processes of the executives and middle management.
yeah.
Um, do you ever notice that, and how do you address it?
Well, it's that, I think there's misunderstandings about what people's jobs are if you haven't done those jobs, right? Like, I don't know what people envision my role as at a company a lot of times, because unless you've actually functionally led an engineering team, you don't really know like what goes
Right,
into
right, right.
all of that, right? Like what goes into being on an ELT, and what goes into, like, and so I think it's, I try to be really clear about what my role is and what my job is and what I perceive my responsibilities are, and lay out what I think other people's jobs and responsibilities are too, and to just try to set context, like a shared context of like, and to explain why I care about something, like to explain why I care or why I don't care about something, right? Like, it's because by helping people coach up a little bit, you're also helping them understand like what information is good or not good, and you're curating like, oh, this is what Ken cares about, like this is because this is feeding his deliverables to his team, the ELT, or like, okay, like it's, or I'll tell them it's like, this is, this is stuff that you can handle, right? Like I don't need to be in every detail in every conversation about these sorts of things. This is stuff you've got, and I believe you can handle it. And I think by doing that and building that relationship over time, people start to kind of be able to sift out like, okay, like this is the stuff that this position cares about, and this is the stuff that this position doesn't care about, and I think, um, but I also believe, a lot of it is like, it comes down to I guess I'm a bit of an individualist, and it comes down to the trust you build with your team too. Like, and because it's like, um, because you have to have some amount of like trust and psychological safety if to be questioned if people don't understand why you're doing something. They could ask you like, what are you doing and why are you doing this? In a way that is, in a way that is constructive, and then you get the opportunity to be like, oh, like, let me explain this to you. Like, I get it. Like, I get this, why this is confusing. Like, here's what I'm trying to do, and here's why it's important for us, right? Um, because I think that's, if I had to pick the natural friction points I run into every day, it's always around communication and misinterpretation of someone else's actions based on limited context or limited relationship, right? If I think about every workplace conflict I'm involved in, like 99% of them come down to like some communication gap or misunderstanding between two parties, right?
Right.
And, you know, um, so yeah.
No, I like that. Yeah, and the communication is such a, humans are the animal that communicates the most
Oh, yeah.
by far. And yeah, that's always that is where the friction shows up. What do you do to build? Do you think proactively about building psychological safety for your people? And if so, how?
I mean, I think it's, I think it comes down to like trust and ownership and like like positive intent internally and trying to like make room for the conversations and make room for people to have them. But I think it like for me it comes down to, I'd say, first building trust and rapport with the person, and so that they can understand that no, it really does, like, and they have examples of times where they might have made a criticism or something else, and it was not, it wasn't, there weren't punitive responses to it.
Right.
And because I don't, that's the only way I found that you can do it. You can't just, because you can tell people like, oh, come to me with anything, and it's a safe place. You can say that to people, but until you actually have real situations that are built and people have evidence of like, okay, like this is actually the kind of environment that exists here, and they're not just saying this, right? It's not just words on the wall that we're a transparent, open, psychologically safe environment for people, right? It's like, because I think we've all worked at places that say those things, and then you get there and it's like, no, this is not how the culture works, right? Like this is absolutely the opposite of psychological safety, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's
especially I think, as the workforce shifts, right, and as younger people are coming into the workforce, it's much more expected and anticipated. Like not all of them were like psychically damaged in like the early 2000s or something by working with like my first job. I worked for a military contractor, and I was working with these engineers that had been there forever, and they were just the meanest people. Like they would yell at you, like they would call you stupid. I mean, it was like that was my welcome to engineering. You're a moron. You don't know anything. You just got out of college. I've been doing this for 20 years. Like,
oh my
shut up
God.
and listen type of engineers.
Right.
And so, like, they don't exist anymore. But, like, that was my onboarding into the experience. And so, if people aren't getting that same onboarding, and I think it's sometimes like they don't have that same frame of references to, welcome to the craft.
Ah, that's
Um,
so funny.
so, yeah.
God. It's yeah. That's a that is this, that's a start, right? You get that. Like, okay, this is gonna be interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it seems like that tough love environment is it's such an interesting thing because those people probably cared that you were successful,
Yeah.
and that was how they expressed it because they didn't know any better. And I'm guessing that it worked for you
Yeah,
because
I
you
mean,
didn't
well,
run
no, I mean
away.
they were good engineers. The intent was there, right? It was just a different work culture, a different
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
It's how they were, brought into the profession,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
they were just emulating what how
Yeah.
they learned to be engineers themselves too, and I
Yeah.
think that's, definitely no, I mean, I learned a ton, and I had, and like as gruff as they were, I still worked the projects. I was still a member of the team. They'd make fun of you, but because you were the kid there, and they put you on the crappiest contracts because they didn't want to go to these different places. So they make you go to those places. But I mean but I did learn a lot, and I had the
Right.
opportunity to learn from people that did have excellent skill sets, right? And they,
Yeah.
we're really masters at their craft, and had a lot to offer. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's I think there's a lot of value to building our own sense of psychological safety and our own self-confidence by being in an environment like that. But I think it's also not everyone, like you have to tune that because there's some people that you'll just blow them out of the water if you do that, you know,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
and and yeah, I'm thinking of one of the profs I had in trade school was totally like that. He was an old Navy vet and amazingly good teacher,
yeah,
and every day reminded us how stupid we were. And yet, I learned so much more from him than I did the other prof, who uh, he wasn't emotionally invested. You
yeah.
know, I think that's the way how it played out. Yeah, Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And I don't think HR would let a company get away with that today.
No,
I think, yeah, that would
no,
be a
not
problem.
some of it. Yeah, not some of
Yeah.
it. No,
Like,
no, it's
you know,
they said it's illegal now. Yeah, no.
that'd be terrible. Yeah. I think that would be, and, that's, you got to figure out what's the balance point, like how do you make that work appropriately, Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's just, and I say modern management is really, I try to figure out how people like receiving feedback, right? Like coaching
Hmm.
feedback, corrective feedback, and, and try to figure out the most effective way to offer it. I think, and trying to figure out what resonates with a person. Some
Right. Right.
people, they want it in writing and time to process it, and then they want to talk about it, right? Some people you want it in the moment. Some people, I mean, I think I think there's a lot of ways. So I mean, that's how I have kind of adapted the style. Is that yeah, you still have to give people corrective feedback, and not everyone likes getting that information. But what you can do is offer it in a way that is like the easiest for them to process it,
Right.
and the
Right.
most empathetic way to actually relay that information to them in a constructive manner. Um, so. That's
Yeah.
just that those guys had one interface. That was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You were getting feedback the way they wish to give you feedback, whether you liked it or not. And that's just how it goes. Like we've augmented. The modern business has augmented a little bit to like structuring it a bit differently. But
Right.
I think the
Yeah.
intent is still there.
And
So
I'm not sure that the current model's better. I mean, I, I'm, I'm not, um,
yeah, it's if you're still giving accurate feedback, right? Because what doesn't work is not giving the feedback or softening the feedback to the point of inefficacy, right?
right.
And
Right.
I do see that
100%.
in a
Yeah.
lot of inexperienced leaders. I see no people don't like to be perceived as mean or be perceived as like taking a hard stance on something, and it's like, well, but you sort of have to, like, you have to give
Right.
the
You have to.
feedback,
Yeah.
like you have to, like it's part of the
Yeah.
job, and like you know and that's actually one of the harder coaching lessons sometimes I find with younger managers these days is don't weaken the feedback to the point where it's not feedback anymore, right? Like
Right. Right.
don't soften it to the point of inefficacy. Like you could, there's a bunch of ways to deliver this, but like you have to deliver this point.
Right. Right.
This is the point that has to be delivered. We can practice it, but like you have to relay that this is a problem or a concern or a challenge, or and yeah, they might not like you afterward. They might be mad at you, like, and yes, you have to deal with that aspect of it too.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you know, um,
Well,
I tell, yeah,
yeah. And that's, it's a communication problem.
yeah,
Again, it's, I think one of the things about engineering that I think goes grossly underappreciated is how critical communication is, and working on building your own psychological safety.
yeah,
Because if you have your own psychological safety, then you'll speak up in meetings and you'll ask questions and you'll volunteer for the harder projects, and you'll 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 be the person that's organizing those engineering groups, and you're setting yourself up to get promoted,
yeah,
and and you're taking that risk because you see the value in it. And I think, I mean, looking back, like, that's how I got promoted all the time, was because I was much more comfortable taking risks than most of my peers were. And so I'd like, oh, I'm going to, whatever, like, I'm going to go talk to these people, or
yeah,
I'm going to go ask the boss for money because we need new hardware, or, whatever it happened to be. And yeah, I failed a lot, but yeah, I learned, like, that's the game. And,
yeah,
and I had to do a ton of work on my communication skills. You
yeah,
know, when I started off, I had horrible social anxiety, and so I had to figure out a system to unwind my social anxiety. Um, and it worked very, very, worked ridiculously well. But I think that was one of those, um, that was one of those career unlocks. Was getting rid of the social anxiety, and then, okay, I'm going to go talk to people and take risks and play with communication. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's, and I think fostering a culture where you're hiring people that are those people, right? That are the ones that are naturally curious, that are the ones that are not deterred by barriers, the ones, I mean, those are like the critical hires for startups especially. And that's like,
Yeah.
I'd say like the traits you've identified are like the traits that I seek in any kind of ownership culture, and I think that's the, and curating that, and curating that, and making sure that people that do that are not just that it's an environment where they can do it, but like make sure everyone knows that this is a great example of what you should do in
Yep. Yep.
business, right? Like if you want to get ahead, like, a little bit of hustle never hurt anybody. You know what I mean? A little bit
Right.
of like
Right.
getting involved and caring about your job. And, that's why I'm at where I'm at too, right? I think everybody, I think almost every executive I've probably worked with, has a backstory where there
Mm-hmm.
were periods of their life where they were grinding, they were grinding hard, and they were ambitious, and they took risks, and they charged ahead. Very, very rarely do you meet like someone who is a leader at a place that doesn't have some sort of backstory, and
Right.
some sort of origin story, like, whether it was adversity in childhood and then, carry them through life, or, but everyone has kind of and then, has a drive, and really seeks to get ahead, in
Right.
life. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. I think that may be the other, having that drive and that self motivation,
yeah,
and not waiting to be told what to do. Um, I think that's also, that's a, it's like, uh, competing with yourself.
yeah,
That's how I think of it, is I'm competing with myself, and what can I learn, do, improve, get better at, um, today, that is will have me be better than I was yesterday or last week, last month, last year, whatever.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's
I
that.
think, yeah, 100%. I Even when I was individual contributor, and this is advice I give them, is like, what's your goal for the day? Like, what is your individual? I mean, you have your tickets and everything else, but like, when you exit this day, what will you feel good about accomplishing? Right? What have you learned?
Right.
What have you done? Like when you close your laptop today, right? What would you have wanted to do? And that, because that's I think and and did you do it? Did you not do it? Like, what were the hurdles that you had to overcome to kind of to do it? But like, I think for me, that was always what I think made me keep going, especially like working as an engineer at startups, is like, I can't close my laptop until this is done today. Like, I won't,
Right.
when I
Right.
won't, I will not be personally satisfied with myself if this is not complete by the
Yeah.
time and some days you did it and it's 4 o'clock and you're like, well, good work, Ken. And some days
Right.
it's
Right. Right.
10 o'clock at night and you're like, God damn it.
Yeah.
I gotta, like, I have to fix this, and I think that's but I think it's trying, but I think it's people that I tell the engine, I'm like, I just want you guys to care. I don't want you to have to like feel like you need to work long hours, but I want to feel like that, like you care enough that if we all got to lean in and do it, you can do it, right? Like
Right.
I think
Right.
that driver, that desire, and that a personal motivator, like that you take it personally and that you care
Right.
enough to make this happen because you care about your work, you care
Right.
about your job, you care about how your coworkers perceive you. Like if you're just here to clock in, clock out, that's not a startup life. You know what I mean? Like we all rely
Right.
on each other, and we all show up for each other. And so that's always one thing I think that I can't articulate enough how important it is, and to have people that work with you to do that.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah. That may be one of the underappreciated parts of working at a startup, is that it's not just you're clocking in and clocking out. Yeah.
yeah,
And you have to make sure every job description you ever write from now on, that you include that, like, you've got to care about this, otherwise we don't want to talk to you, you
yeah,
know because I think I mean, I've heard people saying, I just want to go get a paycheck, and they're applying to startups, and that that's a bad combo. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to
No,
have,
it is.
yeah, it's the, I always think about intrinsic motivation. And if you're not intrinsically motivated, then all those things that you want, you're not going to get, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
No, you know, I mean, I think it was even like a lesson back in college, right? You get out what you put in. Like you can
right.
go to college and get a degree and not work that hard, or you can go to college and learn a ton and, you know,
Yeah.
you know, come out all the better for it. Same is true with engineering. You can sling code and make a great living and just kind of, you know, coast along, or you can, you know, I say if you want to be a great engineer, it's a lifetime of learning. You're always learning. You're always
Right.
absorbing new skills, new knowledge, and putting the extra effort in to like maintain currency and learn all the new things. And it's not like you know, you get paid at your job to sit there and learn about, you know, everything that's going on in the world of engineering around you, right? Like,
Right.
so,
Right.
you know, it just depends on what level you want to be and how far you want your career to go
Right.
and you know, what you
Yeah.
personally value. But yeah.
I like that. That's cool. Thank you. This has been awesome.
This has been great.
Yeah. Yeah. This is why I'm doing this,
Yeah.
is to get people to talk about this kind of stuff, because people don't, you know,
Yeah.
and,
No, it's true.
and, you know, it was, I'm trying to, make sure that future generations don't struggle as bad as I did. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because you know, like my first team, they they did amazingly well because I was doing stuff that they liked, but I was super scared because I couldn't figure out what I like. I was doing the right stuff, but I didn't know what I was doing,
Yeah.
and um, I'm like, I I don't like this. This because this is it's too scary for me, because I kept thinking someone's going to figure, like I had horrible imposter syndrome at the time.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It was terrible, and I kept thinking someone's going to figure out that I have no clue what's going on, and that all I've done is I've hired a bunch of really smart people. Like I've gotten insanely lucky, and someone's going to figure that out, and I'm going to get fired. You know, like that was my big fear. Uh, and Yeah, it was just, it was. I just look back on that. I'm like, wow, if someone had been able to like give me some semblance of understanding that I was doing the right stuff, it, it would have totally changed that experience. Um, yeah, it was pretty funny. That was I look back on that, and it was, you know, it was just I was intrinsically motivated to make it work, you know, and the fact that it sucked emotionally was like, you know, okay,
yeah,
I gotta keep this going.
yeah,
Yeah, so it was interesting. Cool. This has been awesome. Any final
yeah.
words?
No, no. I just thank you for having me. I think
Yeah,
it's
of
great what you're
course.
doing. I think it's great that this podcast exists. And so, no,
Thank
thank
you. I
you for having
appreciate
me.
it.
And yeah, it was a pleasure hanging out.